Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend. I also hope it was helpful last week not having any videos to walk through to give you some extra time just to focus on that PBL web quest you were building, and that was due yesterday. So I will be getting those graded over the course of this week and giving you feedback on those as well. So we're moving into a new topic area now where we'll kind of spend the next 2 weeks, and you'll have another bigger project where you'll be creating a digital citizenship lesson, just to give you kind of the big picture view of this. But so we're finished with PBL, problem-based learning, and now we're moving into a new area of digital citizenship. So that's the plan for this video. We'll talk about some different areas of digital citizenship. You'll watch a video, you'll go through a little training from a great organization, and you'll find some resources that you'll start to use in 5B to create a digital citizenship lesson that you could use in your future classroom. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about what is digital citizenship, and go from there. So digital citizenship, big picture, if you're not familiar with the term, it basically means how to be a good person online. And in today's day and age, that's a really, really important thing that our students need to learn. Students are online as early as kindergarten these days, if not before. There are some preschools even where students are doing work on tablets and things like that. Whether or not that's beneficial is, up for debate. But the point is, students are online at increasingly earlier ages. If you have any younger siblings, you've probably seen this, or if you work with younger kids ever, you probably know that it just keeps getting younger and younger when students are being exposed to technology and when students are online. So that puts a lot of importance on us as teachers to teach students how to be safe online, how to be good citizens, how to contribute to a positive culture online. And so big picture, that's what digital citizenship is all about. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but we tend to use the Common Sense curriculum. It's a wonderful organization that provides lots of free resources to teachers, and they break down digital citizenship into these 8 issues. And so in the end, you'll be picking one of these to focus on, that you feel connects to your future subject area and grade level to develop a lesson around. So be thinking about which of these you sort of connect with, and which makes sense in your future area. I would argue that all of these can be taught all the time throughout K-12 in different ways, and it looks different depending on the subject area and depending on the grade level. But my thought is students never really stop learning these things. You don't ever reach a point where you're a perfect digital citizen and you know everything. It's an ongoing process where students learn how to handle life online throughout their K-12 experience. I mean, it's something that, even today we're still learning as social media changes, as these digital environments change. So I don't think it's a thing where, you ever finish learning about it. But hopefully one of these topics in particular will stick out for you, and you can say, oh yeah, that's something I really connect with. That's something that I could integrate into my future grade level and subject area. So just have that question in the back of your mind as we're going through these slides. We'll explore all 8 of these just in a little detail, and just be thinking about, oh yeah, that sounds like something that would be fun to teach, that would be relevant to my future students, that I'm interested in exploring further. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll go through all 8 of these, but we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up to the top. So we'll start with creative credit and copyright, which also connects to cheating and plagiarism, just because this is they're all really important issues, but this is kind of a good place to start because I think lots of people have experience with this also. So let's talk about a few examples in terms of plagiarism, cheating online, providing credit for things that you are using from digital sources. It's all kind of lumped together into this one topic. This slide is to show how incredibly easy it is for students today to use someone else's work as their own, to cheat, to plagiarize, to not give credit. You can record answers on your headphones, so then you're listening to them during an assignment or a test. You can take pictures of books, of answer keys, of notes on your phone. There are literally essays for sale all over the place. If you tweet, hey, I'm looking for help on my Civil War essay, there are Twitter bots that are scanning for those types of keywords all the time that will immediately reply and say, hey, why don't you check out, English essays for, or I guess social studies essays for sale.com, and we'll be happy to provide you original content for $3. So it's wildly easy to cheat and get content that's not your own. Texting friends for answers. When I was teaching high school biology, this was so common. Students would, as soon as my test was over, they would text to their friends in later periods, hey, here's what's on the test, here's what you need to know, here's what you need to focus on, etc. Or kids can just Google it. Anything that's a fact, how easy it is to Google things these days. You can ask Siri, So how do we handle teaching in an environment like this? How do we maybe shift our teaching practices in an environment like this where this type of cheating, if students are going to do it, maybe it doesn't matter because we're changing the way we teach, we're changing how we focus on things, and we're doing things where we focus more on the learning process and less on these sort of traditional deliverables of writing an essay or doing a multiple choice test or something like that. Not that those things are inherently bad, but there's ways that we can change our focus so that this type of cheating doesn't impact the learning process. This, you can Google this if you want to, but the point of this slide is that there's tutorials out there for a billion different ways to cheat. This is how you can scan a Coke bottle, edit the text on it, print it back out, put it back on your Coke bottle, and then you've got an answer key for whatever test you're taking there on your Coke bottle. There's so many tutorials like this. This is a device that's literally designed to help students cheat on tests and exam. It's a discrete communication device. So you've got this earpiece that's hard to see, you've got this collar, and then a camera that can look at your exam. So you can listen to a partner who is watching what they see on the camera and telling you answers in the earpiece. Photo math, if you've never seen this, I'd recommend checking out this video also, especially if you're a math teacher. It can look at any type of equation and give you the answer for it. Where it can be helpful is it also gives you the steps to solve the problem. So if you're wanting to learn, actually, how do I solve this? It's a really wonderful app. But if you're wanting to cheat and just get the answers, it's also a really wonderful app because it'll just give you the answers. But it's really impressive technology also, so I would recommend checking out that video, especially if you're a math person. So the point is, cheating happens regardless of digital tools. I can think back to my own K-12, before we had smartphones and things like that. People were passing notes all the time. People would look over at their friends' tests. People would walk up to the pencil sharpener and look at what other people were writing and saying. People would buy essays from other students all the time. So these things have happened since the birth of our education system. It's not a new thing that students are going to try and cheat and get away with things. So the question is, one, why do students cheat? So I would ask yourself that question and think about times in the past where maybe some of your peers, of course not you, but some of your friends have cheated, and why do they cheat? And maybe it's because they're not confident in their own abilities, maybe because they're bored by the learning, maybe because they are stressed by a million other things, or stressed by, you know, horrible life outside of school, and they didn't have time to study, and so the easiest solution is just to cheat. Or sometimes it's just easier to cheat than to learn something that doesn't seem relevant or doesn't seem exciting. So one thing you can do is think about those things. Why do students cheat? And realize that maybe some shifts in the way we teach need to happen to make content more engaging, more relevant, less focused on just, you know, lecturing and then having students get multiple choice tests. But also, how can we, instead of trying to catch cheating, how can we try to catch learning? How can we structure our classes so that the learning process is visible to us as teachers? And so when students are in our classroom, we're actually seeing what they're doing and what they're learning. And so then we know where our students are at, what they know, what they're comfortable with, what they're still struggling with. We talked about this a while back with formative assessments like Kahoot. Nearpod's another great example, which you'll be using soon to create a digital citizenship lesson. But those formative assessments and one-on-one check-ins with students are wonderful, because then you can actually see, what are they learning, what do they know, what are they struggling with. And I think you'll probably notice a commonality across all these things that students are cheating on. It's typically things where there's one right answer and there's a multiple choice test or an essay. It's something where students can get the right answer or the wrong answer. And what hopefully you saw a little bit with our problem-based learning unit is there's ways to structure our learning that improve on that. So students are building arguments, creating presentations, making videos, all those things we keep talking about that are also part of the culminating activities you designed. Those are really wonderful ways to catch learning. Because when students are having to do research and create an argument and support that argument and have conversations about their understandings of things, that's a wonderful way to see what they actually know. And it's a way better way to help make learning more relevant to students as well. Because I know we've all been in those classes where it's just someone lecturing and then you're having to give a multiple choice test back or write a short answer back. And then it's just you're learning it so that you can pass the test, and you're not learning it because you want to learn it. And that's a big shift to think about and to focus on in our education system as a whole and in your future classrooms as well. So that would be one topic that you could do. Here's some ideas to think about how you can catch learning. In general, student production tasks like you created here. Contributing to Wikipedia is such a fun way to have students demonstrate their knowledge, and it's something that can be semi-permanent as well. For ELA, if students are purchasing essays, you can have them go through the writing process in class. So they're working on the outline, they're working on the draft, they're talking about their writing, they're doing peer reviews, there's checkpoints, there's personalized examples. Math, a great way to do it is with flipped classrooms, which we talked about in our last discussion. So students watch videos about the content outside of class, and then they apply their understanding in class, so you can work through problems together and help students solve the problem and provide feedback. Same thing in science. You can do the labs in the classroom, which is pretty typical for science classrooms. So then you're working with the students on the lab, you're helping them collect the data, understand the data, things like that. Foreign language, have conversations in class. I am definitely guilty of just copying text into Google Translate and submitting things like that. And that's, for anyone who's fluent in the actual language, it's wildly obvious that that's what has happened. So doing things in class as opposed to, hey, go home and write this Spanish essay, that really opens the door for that type of cheating. So just thinking about how you can structure your class in ways where you can catch this learning in process and in progress. Plagiarism, again, this all connects, but if people are using material that aren't their own without providing citations, That's a very common example. So be thinking about these ideas, and if this is something you might want to teach a lesson on to your future students, about copyright, about providing credit, about citing your sources, and about not plagiarizing, things like that. So that could be one thing your lesson could be on. That also connects with information literacy, and it's fine if you want to combine a couple of these topics into one. But the idea behind information literacy is, how do I know what information is true or accurate? And this is a hugely important topic today, with the idea of fake news, with people on social media all the time just sort of seeing something and retweeting it or sharing it back out without actually checking the source to see if it's reliable or valid. This is something that students absolutely need to know how to do, to look at a piece of information and say, is this something reliable? Is this valid? What's the source? When was it written? Who wrote it? What was the motivation behind them writing it? And ask those types of questions to determine if something's accurate. Factcheck.org is a really wonderful site. Snopes.com is a really wonderful site. These sites are there to check the validity of news stories and things that are being shared. But again, this is something you have to teach to students. This is not something you just know from existing as a human. There's so many fake stories out there, fake sites that are designed to look really real, and students need to be able to distinguish what's real, what's not. Because there's a lot of danger, not only in believing things that aren't true, but if you are at a website and you can't tell if it's fake or not, and it's maybe asking you for some personal information or something like that, and you give that site your personal information, that can be really, really dangerous for students as well. Self-image and identity. So as students are growing up, they are forming their own self-image, they're forming their own identity, they're figuring out who they are as a person, in person, but also in the digital world. And this is a very complicated process nowadays. You have essentially your online persona, you have your social media profiles, you have places where you could chat with other people in chat rooms. And how do you form your self-image and digital identity online? It's a very confusing, it's a complicated thing, especially because you have people out there online who aren't honest about who they are, and so students might learn from that and say like, oh, well, I don't have to be honest about who I am, I can be anyone online. And maybe there's some situations where that's okay if you're being like an avatar in a video game or something like that, but understanding what it means to form your self-image and identity online is a very complicated thing that students have to learn. So some questions you might ask: are there risks for creating an online presence that is different from your offline one? Are there benefits as well? There's lots of research that shows that folks dealing with trauma, PTSD, working through those types of issues in a safe online environment that's maybe a little bit removed from their offline digital identity can be a really helpful way in working through trauma. So there's definitely situations where it can be beneficial. But how does that apply in the K-12 space when students are growing up and learning these types of things? What are other reasons why people might feel they can act in ways online that they wouldn't act offline? So you look at trolls online who are going around just saying horrible things to people all the time. What's the reason for that? Why might they act that way? How do we help our students be positive contributors in online spaces? How do we teach students that just because something is anonymous online doesn't mean it's okay to just be a horrible person? So if that's a topic that interests you, then this is another idea that you could talk about and create for your lesson. That one also connects with digital footprint and reputation, so I think it'd be great to combine those two together as well. Your digital footprint, if you haven't heard this term, it's essentially what you leave behind online. So your tweets, your Instagram posts, your Facebook shares, blogs that you write, comments that you leave, in some cases even like the websites you visit or the things that you buy nowadays as well. So all of these things contribute to our digital footprint and our reputation. And there's so many examples of this, both from the student side and the teacher side, of a student or teacher doing or saying something online that was, bad, racist, homophobic, transphobic, Islamophobic, anything like that, they're like sharing hate speech online, essentially, in some way or another, or sharing something horribly racist online, or sharing, taking inappropriate pictures of their teacher or their friends and sharing it online. There's a million things that can go wrong here. And those things have lifelong consequences, both for students and for teachers. And it's really, really, really important that we hammer this home to our students that, hey, just because something is online does not mean it's real, does not mean it doesn't have consequences. Things that you do online absolutely have consequences, and our students need to develop an understanding of how to manage their digital footprint and their online reputation, and what it means to be a good digital citizen, which is the topic of this. So one thing you can do is sort of like use Google Alerts. If you're not familiar with these, you can set these up to see what other folks are saying about you. So that's one thing you can sort of keep an eye on your digital footprint and reputation. It's something you could teach the students, probably more at the secondary level than the elementary level. But the main thing is addressing social media with students, helping them understand the difference between public and private posts. And this is important for future teachers as well, because there's a lot of teachers that share things that have serious ramifications for their careers. But this idea that things on the internet stay there forever, that needs to be just hammered home for our students so that they know that something they do in high school can have effects on college or future job admissions. Something they do in elementary school can stay with them through their entire K-12 career. Things on the internet stay there forever. This is a super important topic at all grade levels. So this could be something that you could teach also. The next one, cyberbullying, also kind of connects with this as well. All three of these, self-image, self-image and identity, digital footprint and reputation, and cyberbullying. You could do one of these topics by themselves, or if you wanted to kind of roll all three of these together, or two of them, that's fine also. Cyberbullying, as you probably know, an absolutely enormous issue in K-12 schools, all grade levels, all subject areas. These stats are probably low at this point. 1 in 4 teens have been cyberbullied more than once. 81% think bullying online is easier to get away with. I think these are both probably higher now. Schools to this day have very poor policies in place typically for how to deal with cyberbullying. A lot of times administration will just say, well, it's online, it didn't happen on campus, so there's nothing we can do about it, and just sort of brush it off. To me, that's horrendous and ridiculous that a school would say something like that, but it's still incredibly common. You probably have your own examples of this, of cyberbullying happening to yourself, to your friends. It's enormously common. Students today have a very difficult time. I don't envy today's students. I grew up before social media in schools. I think most of you did as well, at least probably until secondary. So I can't imagine at the elementary and middle school level, it's already a difficult time enough. If you add cyberbullying on top of what's already going on, that's a really, really hard environment that a lot of our students today are dealing with. And they need support. They need teachers that they can trust, that they can talk to, that they know are going to help them through difficult situations. And that's a really, really important thing that we as teachers, I would say, have to provide, should provide, need to provide. Our students need that support from us more than anything else. They're dealing with things outside of our classroom that we can't understand, that we don't know, and they need an adult that they can trust, that they can go to in difficult times. And we as teachers have to be that, because unfortunately they don't always have that in their parents. Some of them are fortunate enough to have that, but for a lot of our students, we are the only adult that they see in the course of a day who actually cares about them, takes the time to check in with them, sees how they're doing, notices if they're struggling, if they're having difficulties. We have to be that person for our students. That's one of the most strong things I believe about education, that we are there to not just teach them science, teach them social studies, teach them English and math. We are there to support them as human beings as they grow up and develop, so that they know that they have someone who cares about them and supports them. And I think that those ideas really come into play with cyberbullying, because you're going to have many, many students who are experiencing in-person bullying, but also cyberbullying, just because it's so common. So this could be a really powerful, important thing to do a lesson on if you wanted to talk about that. Yeah, let's move on to the next one. Relationships and communication. So students are going to be exploring relationships. As part of growing up, they're trying to understand what relationships are, romantic and friendship relationships. It's part of the growing process. And just like everything else, the digital online world makes that much more of a difficult process to navigate. So you can talk to your students about having conversations, flirting with people that they don't know. That connects with some of these others as well. But like, how do you actually know the person online you're talking with is the person they say they are? And this is what I was just talking about. Make sure your student feels safe talking to a trusted adult, which is you. Build those relationships with your students so that they know they can trust you and talk to you. Talk to your students about healthy relationships, building healthy relationships. Middleway House in town here does a really wonderful program called Building Healthy Relationships, where they go to schools and talk about these ideas. But this is something that so often gets overlooked. Oh, it's not part of science. It's not part of math. Why do we need to teach it? This is fundamental to human development. Like, what does it mean to be in a healthy relationship? Students need to understand what that looks like. They need to know how they can advocate for themselves if they're not in an unhealthy relationship, and what an unhealthy relationship looks like. This is incredibly important to understand. And be on the lookout for warning signs in your students. That's part of building relationships with them so they can trust you. You'll know when your students are off, when something's wrong, if they're not focusing like they used to, if they're late, if they are having difficulty concentrating, if they just seem off and disconnected, if they're pushing people away and they weren't before. There's so many warning signs you can look out for, but you cannot look out for those warning signs unless you know who your students are. And that's so important, is to just get to know them, who they are outside of your classroom. This video, there's a link to it in the announcement and module for this week. It's a really good video of a teacher addressing how that you can talk to your students about these types of topics, how you can do it in a digital way. It's a really great lesson. It's a 6-minute video, but it's a great one that I think exemplifies how you can teach these types of things, and how you can do so in a way that connects to your subject area standards as well. All right, 2 more to talk about. They're a little faster. Privacy and security. You've got to teach your students what's private. How do you be secure with your information? Setting up good passwords, but also letting them know that websites collect information on you. If you've ever bought something on Amazon and then gone to Facebook and seen an ad for that exact thing, like, we're having information collected on us all of the time. Our emails, our websites we visit, what we post on social media, it's all being collected. It's all being analyzed, usually in a way to sell us things, but also sometimes, as we've seen recently, in a way to promote certain ideologies, political parties, things like that to us as well. Students need to understand that that's happening, and they need to know that just because something is free, like Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, it's not really free. They're collecting information on you all the time and using it, like I said, usually to sell things. So is that exchange worth it? Most people are fine with exchanging their personal information for the use of those services that help us connect with our friends. But it's important to know that that exchange is happening, to be aware of it, and to know what type of information sites are collecting on you. So this is something that students should be aware of at all levels. and be cognizant of what it means when they're giving out information online and what the potential consequences of that could be. Finally, internet safety. 95% teenagers between the ages of 12 and 17 are online. That's pretty much all middle and high school students. And like I said at the beginning, it's becoming even more prevalent, definitely 3 through 5 and even K through 2 as well. Almost 2/3 are visiting social networks, sending instant messages, sending emails. 74% of teens say that they access internet on their mobile phones, which is not the family computer like it used to be. You didn't have the one family computer where, there was sort of some oversight at times. This is on their mobile devices. It's their own personal device. Maybe parents are checking it sometimes. Maybe they're not. So, yeah, this stat says more than 1 out of every 2 teens has been a victim of cyberbullying. That seems more accurate to me, but less than 1 of 5 have reported it. To me, this is a comment on our systems in place. It's hard for a student to report something that happened to them online. What's even more hard is typically the victim blaming that happens after they report it, and our system saying, oh, well, you should just defriend them. Oh, well, you shouldn't have posted what you said in the first place. That's a horrible attitude to have towards students. It's never the victim of cyberbullying's fault that they were bullied. It's always the perpetrator's fault. They chose to say or do something horrible to the other person. And this connects to what we were talking about earlier. Students need a trusted adult that they can come to. You should be that teacher that they can come to and say, hey, something horrible is happening to me. I trust you. Please help me deal with this situation. And that's hard. It's hard to be that person and to support your students in that way. But I would argue that's one of our most important roles as educators as well. So, based on all that, you should pick one of these topics that sort of resonates with you. Let me zoom back to that first slide. You should pick one of these topics that resonates with you, and think about something that you could teach in your future classroom. Information literacy a lot of times is great for the secondary level, same with creative credit and copyright. A lot of times folks at the elementary level focus on these 1 through 6. But again, I would argue at any level, all of these are incredibly important, and there's ways to integrate them at every level. So what you'll do for 5A is pick one of these to focus on, and you'll start finding some resources to teach this topic. Infographics, videos, lesson plans, images, whatever it might be, websites. Find a great collection of resources that you could use to teach this topic in your future classroom. And if you're struggling picking one of these, definitely let me know, and I'm more than happy to help you on that. Sorry that this video went a little longer, but this to me is one of the absolutely most important topics. And it's something that gets overlooked in K-12 so often because teachers will say, oh, it's not my responsibility to teach this, it's the parents. And secondary teachers will say, oh, it's not my responsibility, they should have learned it already by the time they came to my classroom. Personally, I disagree fundamentally with those ideas. I think all teachers at all levels in all subjects should be responsible for at least teaching some of this and emphasizing this to their students. But that's just my personal belief, and I'm totally fine if folks disagree with me on that. I think that it would be a great discussion to have about whose responsibility it is to teach these things, and that's part of our Flipgrid discussion this week as well. So definitely don't be afraid to be critical of what I'm saying and to push back against what I'm saying. I'm absolutely fine with that. But I'm looking forward to our conversations in Flipgrid about this as well. And let me know if you have any questions at all on any of this.